to a new yet old culture with greater ease than I could ever have imagined. I began writing about my European experiences for Europeans. Now, all these years later, the success around the globe of the Netflix series Unorthodox, which inspired translations of my work in countless foreign languages, proves the universality of the journey. Regardless of the geographic specifics of my post-religious exodus, the audiences for stories are no longer local or regional, as many once feared. More and more, our treasure trove of stories is becoming a common resource, transcending all boundaries of culture, identity, and language. It is a result of this transformation that I can offer you the fully realized story, revisited from a later vantage point. Although the trajectory of my life has taken some surprising turns since my departure from the Hasidic community, somehow, I have the feeling it will prove its universality as well. Preface. In urban Williamsburg, in the confines of the Satmar Hasidic community where I grew up, children were taught the ancient biblical laws dating from the era of the Temple, a time before the diaspora, when Jewish people had a sense of home and the dignity that is its consequence. These laws had been rendered mostly abstract by the changes in our circumstances. But even though we rarely had the opportunity to apply them, they were part of the great inheritance that was to serve as our solace in what is seen as a temporary period of exile. An exception to those laws was declared for my grandmother's garden, perhaps one of the last plots of land in Williamsburg that had not been smothered with cement, which my grandfather treated as if it was our personal holy land, applying the complex laws of agriculture to that little island of greenery as if it were a farming initiative and not simply my bubby's personal sanctuary, a rare thing of beauty to which she escaped when she needed peace. My grandfather insisted on imposing a religious order on everything in our lives, not only those aspects that were required, and the garden was certainly not to be overlooked. Perhaps this relentless discipline gave him comfort after the chaos he had experienced during wartime. However, it was the order of nature to which my grandmother, also a Holocaust survivor, was still most loyal. The conflict that sputtered between them all their married life, and probably the conflict that brewed early on in my own spirit as well, can very likely be traced back to these competing allegiances. In their case, however, it was my grandfather who eventually triumphed, and biblical law was applied to the garden my grandmother had so lovingly cultivated over the years. The inflexible application of those ancient edicts proved to be the death of that miniature paradise and, in a way, the loss of the grandmother I knew and loved, which I would realize only many years later, when I was wrestling with her sudden physical absence. I had already experienced losing her emotionally and spiritually, as old age seemed to fragment and diminish her, to carry her further and further away from me and into the world she had always privately inhabited. In the world I grew up in, there was no rest or retreat from the omnipresent intrusion of religious tenets. Even then, I imagined I knew God better than any of the old and wise people around me. I suspected they had grievously misunderstood him. Such is the arrogance of a childhood that has known no abject degradation or suffering. These people had survived the apocalypse, and they had conjured a new, post-apocalyptic God, a paroxysm of uncontrolled fury. And therefore, my community no longer availed itself of the many leniencies and permissions that had once marked our religion, like complex embroidery on a simple cloth. Instead, it sought to draw a pristine cloth even tighter around itself, in the hope that the narrowness of structure and belief would restore the sense of security that had been permanently snatched from them. The more open the world around them became, the more they withdrew. I, too, should have been subsumed by the regulations as I came of age in our little shtetl, but somehow the forces within me conspired to carve out enough mental space for independent thought to flourish. Later, desperate for the physical space in which to apply my own ideas, I left for the outside world, never to return. Upon doing so, I promptly attempted to shed the obligatory personality I had worn like a shell for all those years, hoping that what would emerge from underneath it